Hey, what's up, everybody? This is the Unconventional Therapist Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave, and I am joined here with my co host. His name is Greg Slenderman.
Yes, it is.
Is
That
that your
is my
real
name.
full name, right?
Yeah,
Look it
I
up
know.
online. It's definitely your name.
It's on there in small bits. In some crease of the internet, there's a
Yeah.
Greg Slenderman. Not as scary as the actual one.
Could be, depending.
Not as big of a following or as wildly popular, but he's out there. So, Dave, how have you been doing, Dave? I mean,
I I have been hanging in there.
oh,
It's been a really action-packed first couple of months of a year, I gotta say.
stress or good action
Name
or
it. Nope, not
no, I know,
great.
dude. You know what's funny? Like just hearing you say that, I feel awful saying this, but it makes me feel good to hear you say that just because I feel like I'm not alone because I've had a stressful couple of weeks, dude.
Yeah.
I really have. So, whew.
Yeah.
So try
Yeah.
to like,
I know. And like, as we do in our profession, we try to stay present, try to find the positive in situations and,
mhm.
doing our best to do that. But if you're out there and you're also having a rough start to the year, we're here with you and we're
Yeah,
here recognizing the challenge that it takes to just kind of truck through everything.
I know. If you're already saying things like 2026 is going to be my year.
I I stopped thinking any year was going to be my year within the
Yeah.
last few years because it's like, wow, maybe 2018 was my year.
Yeah. I hope
Like,
I might have a good retirement.
yeah, that's one thing we can hope for.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we can retire. But anyways,
Oh, that's okay.
let's not go there.
Good question. Yeah, it really is. Well, Dave, okay. All
So,
that being said,
yeah,
we
we're doing a special episode. Well, I say special. I don't know if any episode we ever do now is special because we have made it a point in every season, in every holiday, as we enter holidays or come up to holidays or seasons, we always try to do something that honors that time of the year, right?
yeah.
And this episode is going to kind of do that. And we apologize that it's coming at the end of the month rather than the beginning, but just the order of however our episodes fell this month.
Better late than never.
But it has been Black History Month in February.
Hmm.
So we're going to close it out with one that I've been wanting to do for a while. So, Greg, I'll let you take the reins.
Well, I gotta be honest, when I first thought of the Black Panther Party, I always assumed it was this like radical militant, and it's kind of militant, but anti-white, almost like your answer to the KKK, like almost extreme like that. That's
Yeah.
kind of what I thought. So that's actually not the case at all. Like when you think about it today, there's almost like this common thread that's like the police need policing. And I'm not an anti-police person by any stretch of the imagination. I think, there's good and there's bad. But this is, I think, an answer in part where like the cops needed to be watched and the people were being mistreated, and we'll get into all that, of course. But this opened my eyes a little bit. And it's like this when the slaves were freed, there was that period of time just before and just after where it got like even harder for the slaves. Just like as when they were freed, there's a lot of pushback and people hated that. And this is the same kind of thing as like this is coming up on and just after civil rights. So it's almost like when there's a big change or a lot of progress in, racial tension or immigration or any of these like hot topics, even like abortion, any of these hot topics, there's like immediate pushback. And I think like this is just coming at a time like that. So I think I'm going to talk a little bit about the origin, just a touch of the origins, like an event that happened. And then Dave, I'll let you get in more in
Sure.
deeper into the origins.
And
Okay.
Greg, just before you do that,
Yeah, sure.
I just want to reflect also. One of the reasons why I thought this topic might, and actually, when I first added this to our list, it was actually a couple of years ago. So, and I thought it was probably a good topic to bring up because of that. One of the reasons is exactly what you just said. You're right. After there's movements, after there's like these developments, we do see this instant pushback, or we see pushback when it feels like a movement's gotten some legs to it, correct?
Mhm.
And
Of course. Yeah.
I think we've seen that with a number of movements over the last few years, because the last few years has been full of movements, right? There's been so many, from Me Too to Black Lives Matter to political, all the political stuff that's gone on over
Yeah.
the last, however long. But I think that we've seen the Black Lives Matter movement in particular get some legs, really start to make, some significant noise.
Mm.
And I think we started to see some pushback.
You did. And like, it's almost like a cultural thing where it's almost sad to see like we're just not as good at things anymore. We're like when you think about like MLK and even the Black Panthers, it's like Black Panthers were kind of about self-defense. It was kind of about bringing up the community.
Yeah.
And nowadays, a lot of these like a lot of groups, different groups, is about like even like it's such a difficult conversation to have. But it seems like sometimes it's more about tearing down than building up. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
Okay.
almost like the Black Panthers were like people think it's just, but they were like the white people were completely involved in this too, and it was like this kind of I can see you wanting to push back right now, and I'm and I'm fine with it. And like it's a hard line to tread. You know what I mean? It's just it seemed like the things that the Black Panthers are doing, like community building, like charity, and actually like creating really important things, like even like funding like sickle cell treatments. You know what I mean? They were
Right.
doing huge things. I just and maybe it's just a cultural thing. We just don't see that kind of commitment or work ethic anymore.
I will challenge that thought a little bit, because part of the movement at the time
Yeah,
did encourage people who were looking for ways to participate to find local groups, local, nonprofits to donate to volunteer with. One of the big challenges we had was that was also during the time of COVID. So
yeah,
doing in
yeah,
person stuff was a lot more challenging. And, the in person stuff ended up being like um, rallies and protests and stuff like that. And there's probably less of people actually getting active in the community because of that social distancing that we all had to.
sure.
So maybe it would have looked different at a different time.
Yeah, and there was like something kind of fresh and like interesting about this because what the founders did, and you'll talk a little bit about them,
Yeah.
is so this thing kind of starts with police brutality, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
in a sense, right? But they read up on the open carry laws in California and they're like, oh, wait a minute, you can just walk around the streets with guns.
Right.
And it's like, oh, now we've got something going on here because it's like we're getting a group together, we're armed, and that's when it starts to become like this militant thing. Like if they saw someone getting arrested, they would approach with their guns out and inform the suspect of their rights, and this became cop watching. Like this is a part of this, which
Yeah.
is super interesting, right? Like,
Right.
and then it's what else is interesting, and maybe we'll talk about it later. But I read this article and it was like Reagan is the governor at the time, governor of California, and he's obviously well known, super conservative gun rights president. But he is like writing legislation and helping push legislation at this time to being like, hey, we can't just all be walking around with guns out right now.
Sure.
And it's so funny to hear like politicians on both sides of the aisle. I mean, because look, this isn't a political podcast, so we've never claimed to be. And Dave and I are like completely, open to all sides and, open-minded we are. And that's just the truth. But like, that's you know, using the moment and like, what your will is at the time, and you change your agenda towards what you want instead of like actually believing in something and carrying it through. Because he completely backs away from that when he becomes president, which is strange.
Yeah.
Anyways,
So you mentioned this kind of started with police brutality. Was there like one event that was kind of the antithesis of this, or was it multiple?
yeah, there was. So like one on September 27th, 1966, a police officer shot Matthew Johnson. Now this is an unarmed 16-year-old um
Wow.
in San Francisco. Like that's it just seemed it doesn't it seem like, oh, okay, that sounds very contemporary.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And this
Right.
is what's going on. And this is the thing that kind of got Huey Newton's interest. Okay, so Dave, the Black Panther Party for self-defense, and it does sounds like almost like a karate academy, but it's
Does.
not. doesn't it?
It does.
It starts in 1966, Oakland, California, by political activists Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, which are they're actually college buddies. And this is always like these
And they're
activists.
young too, right?
They're young, they're in college, and it's kind of always that way. These guys, they really thought that what Martin Luther King doing was great. They loved it, they loved the ideas, but they felt like it was a little slow moving, and I get it. Like it's a little uncomfortable to be like when you watch the footage, it's like, yeah, this is, you know, peaceful protest, but when like people are attacking you and spraying you with hoses and
Oh
letting
yeah.
dogs out at you, it's like, come on.
Right.
So a lot of these people are like, no, right? So what they say is they're talking about this. You could imagine it in their college dorms, and they're like, look, the nature of a panther is you push it into a corner and it's going to try to like move left and it's going to try to move right and it's going to try to kind of get you out of the way, like find a place to get by you. But if you corner it long enough, it's just going to like mow you down and attack you. And that's where they felt like they were at. They thought that Martin Luther King did this thing where he tried to kind of get around it. He tried to do everything he can to try to be as peaceful as possible, but it just wasn't working. So they kind of felt like maybe a guy like Malcolm X was a little bit more their speed, who was a little bit more militant, maybe Farrakhan. And they would also say, interestingly, that it's not race that's the problem, which is an interesting take, right?
Oh yeah,
Um,
for sure.
you know what I mean? Like that's not what people think of when they think of the Black Panthers. They didn't feel like it was race at all. They thought it was very much like it's like a socialist thing. It's a Marxist thing. Like we should, it's a class thing. And it's still that way right now. We can feel that where it's like there's people that are ridiculously rich and there's people who are just poor
Yep.
and oppressed. And it's like, ah, man, that's hard. It's hard to see. It's hard to be a part of. And like if there was this, I'm watching a little bit of this documentary and they're in the neighborhoods and there's poor white people in the neighborhoods too, and they're very much welcome in this
Yeah.
because they are part of it's almost like they want it to be it's a socialist movement more than anything,
Right.
I think. So
Did you know that?
no.
Okay. Yeah. And it's a great thing to discover because it gives you a better appreciation for what this is all about. Because when we look at it, like you said earlier, I think a lot of people view it without knowing as almost like a extremist response to like Ku Klux Klan. And that's very far from the truth, I think.
Hmm.
Um,
Understandable though. Like it would have been like that just made sense to me. It was like they need
oh,
that
for the
there
time.
needs to be a
Yeah.
counterpart part to
Right.
like this racism, and it's like
Yeah.
why not fight back? I totally understood it that way, and then thought that was
Sure.
made sense to me.
So, at this time, as we're mentioning, there's a lot of African Americans living in cities throughout the North America that are suffering from economic and social inequality. There's poverty, reduced public services, and those are the things that are really characterizing these urban centers, where the residents are like just subject to poor living conditions, joblessness, chronic health issues, violence, and just have limited means to be able to change their circumstances. And I know that's like a conversation we've had a ton in the past about like, well, is it a are your is your living environment sometimes a choice? And to some extent, but like you have to have some means to incite change. And if you have
Mm.
no means, then at some point it really is environmental, I think, to some extent, right?
It's essentially like leveling the playing field. That's was the
Yeah,
point of this. Like that's what
exactly.
we're trying to do here. Like it almost like these are your police, not our police. They're not
Right.
protecting and serving us.
Well, and the reason for that is, during a lot of these urban uprisings in the 60s, police violence almost became used as a tool to kind of incite order in these cities.
Yeah.
It's like they're using the police authority and their force in order to kind of control. So that was a big issue at the time. And then you want to add even more context to the start of the Black Panther Party. Malcolm X's assassination in 1965 was like definitely something that fueled this along, I think, because it again, like this idea of like kind of like passing on the torch a little bit.
Yeah.
Like we have to continue this movement, or what else is going to happen here? We need to continue to find strength. And Malcolm X, I think, was a great face for that, and is like in a great voice for kind of what the Black Panther Party was going for.
Interesting, very interesting person and podcast in and of himself for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And in all honesty, when I was suggesting this, he was the backup episode that I was thinking in my head because at some point I would love to do that as well. So as you mentioned, they were pretty much dissatisfied with the civil rights movement's inability to change the living conditions for African Americans outside of the South, and the brutality that they saw first used against civil rights protesters just kind of highlighted this like long tradition of police violence and state oppression. So they organized this group, the Black Panther Party, for young, poor, and disenfranchised African Americans. But as you mentioned, it also kind of expanded beyond that. Their purpose was to patrol African American neighborhoods and protect residents from acts of police brutality. So yeah, I mean, this is essentially, like you said, it's like kind of we're going to take things into our own hands, and I think that's a really interesting approach, and I'm trying to think of something comparable that we've seen in more recent time.
I, so obviously, like you mentioned before, like the Black Lives Matter is kind of
Yeah, but
similar.
it doesn't
No,
feel
it
the
doesn't.
same,
I mean,
right?
the Black Panthers in uniforms. I mean,
They
uh,
literally took to the streets,
they took to the
but
streets with
not
uniforms.
just to like make noise, but to like, no, 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 we're gonna take over here.
Right. And you know that Seal and Newton were saying like when people would ask them like what's up with the uniforms, they're like, well, who doesn't have like a black leather jacket, a beret, and sunglasses? That's what he says. And it's like,
Really?
yeah, I guess like berets were just all over the place back then, you
At
know?
that time, yeah.
At that time they were out there. Yeah. So I mean that's pretty cool.
What are you
So
thinking of when you think of like berets? Yeah, I think of like beatniks. I think of like, you know,
well, I mean you gotta think of like
jazz houses or
Green
something.
Berets, which are badass army guys.
Okay, that as well.
Hmm.
Yep.
And I don't just very recognizable combat boots, um, huge guns,
Yeah.
just kind of like a cool like little like look, you know? A
Yeah.
beret with sunglasses and a leather jacket and
It's
like I
tough.
think it would, yeah, it's tough. Like I think it's like olive green p pants, black combat boots and like a black leather jacket. It's like, all right, that's looking kind of cool.
That is cool.
You know?
So eventually they develop into like this Marxist revolutionary group that calls for arming African Americans,
Mm,
the exemption from the draft and from all sanctions of so-called white America, the release of African Americans from jail, and the payment of compensation to African Americans for centuries of exploitation by white Americans. Kind of, I guess, talking about like reparations
sure.
of that
Yeah.
nature, right? Um, at their peak in the 1960s, their membership exceeded 2,000 individuals, and the organization operated chapters in several major American cities, and you'll learn later, even outside of the US.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? So, did you learn about the Black Panthers in high school or college or anything?
No. Even, I think briefly in an African American history study that I did, but like not a deep dive ever.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder why that is. I think, but when I hear 2000, that's like less than I would have thought too, though. Did you
Yeah.
think that that was a few?
Um I actually thought that it was probably larger, and I didn't realize that, it was um kind of limited in its growth at first of how many states actually had chapters of the Black Panthers.
Yeah, in countries, right? But I guess it's just a little bit here and there, which, you know, but the Black Panther Party, it comes to national spotlight in 67 when a small group of its members, led by SEAL, they march fully armed into the California state legislature in Sacramento. And they're emboldened by this view that African Americans have this constitutional right, just like everyone else, to bear arms. And obviously, they refer to the Second Amendment. The Black Panther Party, they march on the body as a protest against the pending Mulford Act. Now, this act is this thing that I was talking about earlier, where Reagan decides that he wants to ban people's ability to this free carry, or like what do they call it? Like you can just carry in the streets, concealed carry, whatever
Something
that
like
law
that.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever that law is, like they just don't think that that's something that makes sense anymore in California. And
But did he
like
want to ban it for everyone
that's
or
the
for
thing that's
certain populations of people?
well, I think because of what was going on, he felt he had to ban it for everyone because they wanted to put a stop to this and not make it look
Oh,
racial.
but do you also see what that does too, though? Because everyone's, of course, is going to point the finger and see what you did,
Yeah.
see what happens now, and that's just going to cause more resentment and anger, and
Yes.
probably more violence.
Yeah, and these people, like the Black Panthers, are like fully in the crosshairs of the FBI too. J. Edgar Hoover, who has been in power and would be in power, like this guy just had he was all over MLK. He's all
Yeah,
over that. He's like a racist, and he's
he's
just
a
kind of the
racist,
worst, and he would just had a file on everybody. So kind of in Washington, whatever he said went.
right?
And so if he was against this, then they were going to try to come down on the Black Panthers.
Now,
And there's
do you know why they were so scrutinized by the FBI and in their counterintelligence program that they had? Do you know why they were considered to be such a threat?
I couldn't understand why. And now seeing the numbers, I really can't understand. I guess it was just drawing attention to something like it was like this dark little secret. It's like America's dark little secret. It always kind of has been, and it's like and these people are shining a light on it. And I
Yeah,
obviously now I think that we've come so far, and it's we're doing pretty well. I think with it, there's always going to be it's going to when a country like in America where it's so diverse, there's always going to be like some kind of like underlying push and pull with
mm,
all sort of race, and it's just that's just the truth. But I think like we have a we know that, which helps out a lot, I think. Instead of just denying it, we say, no, that's a thing. And
yeah. I think there's some subpopulations of people that will still have some denial about that,
yeah,
but like the general population, or at least the thought that there is hierarchy, there is unfortunately these things that are in place in society that kind of keep certain populations of people um, in place, which is
yeah.
really unfortunate, but it's existed for a long time. At least I think there's awareness to that, so we can try to work on,
Well, the one thing that
eliminating
like
it.
as we're talking about the Black Panthers that I feel is still completely relevant that I think we always forget is this is was and has always been a class issue. It really is.
Yeah,
Like there is just people who are living wildly different than the vast majority of us. And there's enough for and I'm not I've always kind of I was raised in a way where it's like I'm a capitalist, you know what I mean? It's this that and like socialism has always kind of been a bad word to me. Even like when I think of like Jamestown or like the first of like when they tried to like do things and make it sort of
Jonestown.
oh, well, not even Jonestown, not even like the cult. Like, I mean, literally, like when the country's starting and like pilgrims are coming to
Oh,
like
okay.
Plymouth, you know what I mean? And like we're talking about, whenever they try to make it so like everyone gets the same no matter what, that doesn't really work. But I think there's something here where it's like some people have too much, and some people don't have nearly enough, and that's not cool.
That is
As
not cool.
maybe as I get older, it like kind of I start to believe that a little bit more,
Right.
you
But
know?
then you get so much pushback when we do try to instill programs or safety nets to help those who are,
Mm.
you know, in need. You will get pushback even during those times. And that drives me kind of nuts because I'm like, what is the answer here then? If people aren't happy with, this
Mhm.
classism, but they're also not happy when we actually come up with, ways to support and help people because, everybody's so cynical these days and they're like, oh, everyone's going to people just take advantage of the systems. It's like, well, how do you
Dave.
win?
No, Dave, you don't win. But here's the thing, like, and like, I don't want people to get us wrong because you and I both can see what happens when someone's just given everything, and maybe they're on like assistance and they're given everything, and that's not good for them either. That's gonna not gonna let them grow. We're not saying that. We're not advocating for that at all. We just think that everyone should, or I don't want to speak for you, but I just think that everyone should have a shot. And if they're willing to work hard, they should be able to have a shot at getting whatever it is that they
Right.
want. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Like,
programs in place that allow people to grow and allow people to change their environments if
yeah.
they need to, or at least be able to survive.
Yeah, and if you're not willing to work for it and you're capable of working for it, you shouldn't have it.
Yeah.
Like I feel that way. I think
Yeah.
that's like a maybe like a conservative
Will
tenant, and
will
I
there
agree.
ever will there ever be a system in place that somebody won't find loopholes or somebody won't take advantage of? I don't think so. Because that's
No.
human nature. And there's some individuals who will always find that ability.
Yeah, and like today, actually, it's funny that you say that because like today we gave like I was just driving and I like gave money to someone just standing on the side, right?
And then he got
And
into a
like
sports car.
yeah, then he took
Thanks
off.
for
But then he
gas.
bought booze with it. No, you know what I mean? Like there's that
Yeah.
old thing too. But it's like I don't care what you do with it. But the thing is, like my son was like, "Do you think like there's ever going to be not a homeless problem?" And I was like, "I think there was a homeless problem in ancient Rome 2000 years ago, and I think 2000 years from now there'll be a homeless problem. And what does that mean? Like, do we stop trying? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like a weird conversation to have. But
No, I
the
agree with
Black
you.
Panthers were right. It was like this. There's a class issue. There was a class issue in the 60s. There was a issue in the 1260s,
Yeah.
and then you know what I mean. And it's just kind of we
And
want to solve these things, but we can't.
who better to take a step though and say, I'm not going to stand for this. I'm going to protect my community than people of the actual community.
Yeah,
Right?
totally.
Though that's the thing I
That's
think
the
is cool about
difference, though,
this.
isn't that, dude? I
Yeah.
think you just nailed it. Like, that's kind of the difference. I think like the nowadays the virtue signaling kind of gets in the way a little bit, where people are like, you can't do that, or like you can't do that to that community. And it's like let that community like you don't understand that community as much as that community understands that community. And like sometimes I think, the road to hell is paved with good intentions where other people from other, walks of life try to be like, this is not okay. When it's like, well, that's okay actually. And we don't mind this, but like this is the problem, right?
Right. As
You
much as
know?
I want to be able to help
Me too.
everybody and every walk of life, I also realize that like I find it way more endearing and powerful and cool when I see people of actual like of different communities finding their own leaders and those people stepping up and saying, I want you know I want these individuals to do better. I want these individuals to get support. I want to be able to help them because I connect with them in this way. And like I just find that so amazing.
Yeah, me too. I
So
like that.
yeah, one other factor that was briefly mentioned in this origin story, which I think also kind of highlights another thing that was definitely playing into all this. The Vietnam War
Mm.
was happening from like what 55 to 70 something. So
Yeah.
in the
Well,
60s, they mentioned quickly that like the draft, they felt like they should have exemption from the draft. Not an unpopular opinion, even
uh-uh.
outside of the African American community, right? There was a lot of individuals that were like, this is not our war. Why
The
are
hippie
we?
movement, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like they were, I feel like for them it probably shined like a different it looked different coming from them, but it was like more of the same of what a lot of younger people were saying at this time. Like, why are we having to go to this war? And like, we should be taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, like well, I have no problem with the Vietnamese people. I have a problem with you people.
Right, right.
So I'm not
So
gonna like, why should I go die for you if you're
exactly.
not
So
treating me right? You know?
in instead of just sitting there and protesting against the war or like being disgruntled about that, they said no, 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 we're just going to go ahead and we're going to take care of our own people and like help build them up because that's where
Yeah.
our focus should be. So again, like I just see a lot of strength in the way that they were thinking about this. um I don't know, kind of like it a lot. But
I do. I do.
so philosophy wise, actually, Greg, before we move on to philosophy, they by the through the journey of the Black Panther Party, they expanded pretty drastically and they influenced a lot of different communities also outside of the US. Do you want to name a few of those areas?
Well, yeah, of course. Like, so England,
Yep.
have stuff going on there. Germany always needs a hand. I'm just kidding, Germany. We love you. Sweden, Mozambique, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Uruguay, and then maybe a few more other
Yeah, I
places.
think
China was
Japan.
affected,
Yep. France
Um,
and Japan, I think, as well. And they had chapters in 48 states by the time this had grown. So I
I
think that's
wonder
pretty
if it
cool.
was Hawaii and Alaska that were, left out or
What year did
somewhat
Hawaii
up.
join
Oh, before this, I want to
before
say
this?
like
I don't know what
yeah, they
year.
were close. Hawaii and Alaska were really close together. I think it was in the 50s.
Okay, yeah, so they would have. They were like, we got our own issues. We're eating spam over here all the time. Come on.
Yeah, we're new. We don't even know what our problems are yet.
We're new to this party. We don't feel like we should get involved yet. So philosophy wise, so the Black Panthers, very similar to Malcolm X, believed that nonviolent protests could not truly liberate Black Americans or give them power over their own lives. So its members confronted politicians, challenged the police, and protected Black citizens from brutality. Um, the philosophy was heavily influenced by the speeches of Malcolm X, of the Nation of Islam, the teachings of the this I'm going to butcher this. Chairman Mao Zedong.
That's
Uh,
actually dung with a D, kind of, but like that's actually pretty good.
oh, thank you. Of
Yeah.
the Communist Party of China, and the anti-colonialist book "The Wretched of the Earth" by the Martiniquan psychiatrist Frantz Fanon. Are you familiar with that work?
No,
It sounds like you got to get on that.
I know. I like that a lot.
Yeah. So they practice the practice of armed self-defense was influenced by African American activist Robert Williams, who advocated this practice against anti-black aggression by the Ku Klux Klan. So
Maybe that's how I knew about that.
maybe, yeah.
Kind of true.
And Newton and Seal canvassed their community, asking residents about issues of concern. So they not only had their own thoughts, but then they actually went into the community to gather what the concerns are from the people who lived there. So I think that's such a great way to compile a philosophy.
Yeah, and I like how they like did this in this 10-point program thing
Yeah.
where it's like the 10-point thing works great. It's like 10 things I hate about you.
Yes.
It's like you're
Really
it's
works.
it's just good. Here's 10 the 10 commandments. I think Moses, one of our favorites, started it off.
Moses.
10 is the
Yeah,
perfect
why don't you
number.
start off by reading the first five of these bad boys?
Okay, I will. So we want freedom and we want power to determine the destiny of our black community. So they're just essentially saying we want agency to govern our own people and our own lives.
Yeah.
And we want to be able to just almost like they almost had like the Harlem Renaissance and Tulsa, Black
Yeah.
Wall Street, like
Uh,
all that stuff. There was so many opportunities of this, and it just like crushed by racism and like
yeah.
jealousy, really, right?
Really.
So that's one. We want full employment for our people. And this is kind of like a socialist tenet there, where it's like that's not saying we want full opportunity for our people. That's saying we want everyone to be working.
Mhm.
And they want to end the robbery of like the capitalist people are robbing the black community. That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
And eventually the black people will turn that around and be, you know, do really well with the capitalists. You know what I mean? In a lot of ways. Anyways, so we want decent housing, fit for shelter of human beings, which I don't think is asking much at all. I think that's a basic human right.
Yeah.
That's something I believe, especially with the work I've been doing lately, like with homelessness, and I go stand outside for a half hour and it's, 15 degrees outside. People shouldn't be out there, I don't think. And I don't
Yeah.
think there's any re and the people who are given money to take care of that, I don't think they're doing right by that at all. I think they're exploiting that.
Yeah.
Anyways, and the last one that I'll mention, and then I'll let you get to it, is which I think is fundamentally maybe one of the most important things, is we want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society. We want education that teaches us our true history and our role in present day society. It's
I'm
pretty,
gonna I'm gonna predict the future and say it's gonna take decades before they actually even come close to that being acknowledged.
yeah, yeah.
Right?
But it's there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's there, and it's
I feel
powerful.
like we're getting there with education. It's I know that there's a lot of people that feel one way or another about how we teach our kids history and the types of history that we teach, but I feel like we're getting there.
If I'm being completely honest, I understand when some people are like, I don't want my kids like speaking about things with like sexuality. Fine. I'm completely on board with that. Like I get it. I get how you would feel that way. But knowing the whole history, for better or for worse, on both sides, on all sides, I think that's important. You have to know the whole story to be able to make decisions. Like why I've never understood why there's pushback on that. I think that's silly. Again, like, I'm just being honest. Like the sexuality stuff, fine. But like not understanding a full history, dumb. Just
How do you truly gain empathy for people that don't maybe look like you, or different cultures, communities, populations? How do you gain full appreciation and empathy for what people have gone through if you don't even fully know it? I
right.
think that's where it starts as children. And I get it. We love the very filtered and sugar coated history that maybe you and I learned in the
Yeah.
past. It felt something
Yeah.
special, I guess. It was very happy, but
Yeah. Like
there's
Miles
value.
Standish was best friends with like Samoset and they had turkey together.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's I get it. Like there's a lot of novelty
Fine.
in that in those things, but yeah, there's a lot of value to learning about the truth as well. And maybe there's a way that we can embrace that a little bit more. But
We'll
all right,
see.
the last 5 points are: we want all black men to be exempt from military service. We discussed that. We want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of black people. Yes, like that feels crazy that we even have to make that a point, right?
Hmm.
Um, we want freedom of all for all black men held in federal, state, county, and city prisons and jail. We want all black people, when brought to trial, to be tried in court by a jury of their peer group or people from their black communities as defined by the Constitution of the United States. I'm going to assume there is probably this feeling that they're not getting fair trial because when people look at them when they're in court, there's assumptions already being made, or people have their biases. And how do you get a fair trial when that's just kind of society's thoughts at that time, right?
Hmm.
And then we want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. Kind of like a closing sentence. This is what we want. And you're right. A lot of it does sound very socialist, but some of it also sounds just very humanistic.
Yeah. No,
Like
I know.
these are
I
things
know.
that people probably deserve to have. I guess the question that some people probably would have it would be, well, what are you going to do to get those things? And, I think that there's value to that question because, like, yeah, in order to feel like you deserve those things, I guess we have to figure out how society should run, right? How we
Yeah,
offer the
and this like list isn't to say this is a political party, right?
right.
Essentially, what it is. So it's like there's political parties, and not everyone agrees with those political parties. We're all human beings. So it's like, does this is this how every African American person in the United States feels at the time in the 60s? No. But this is
Clearly not if there's only 2,000 members at
yeah.
their
So
peak, right?
like yeah, like so this is not just like everyone does like some people would be like I am the furthest thing from a Democrat or I am the furthest thing from a Republican or an independent or whatever. Like just because there's a political party doesn't mean that that's how everyone feels. That's something we got to be careful about too. Like you just like you almost read this and you're like, "Oh, this is how black people felt in the 60s." It's like, "Well, this is how some black people felt in the 60s."
Right.
And I'm sure like some black people agreed with like 40% of these things or 50 or 60% of these things. And some were like, "Well, you know what? I actually feel pride serving in my country or whatever it is. Like there's everyone's gonna have different points of view.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so you know, the African American cultural nationalists generally regard all white people as oppressors. That's what we're talking about here. The Black Panther Party distinguished between racial and non-racist whites and allied themselves with progressive members of the lattice group. So like there was white people involved in this, right?
Yes.
So the party believed that African American capitalists and elites. So it's like not only is there good whites according to the party, there's also bad black people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
There are people that um, maybe aren't on their same page because of whatever they've bought into, or whatever, however they've kind of like viewed capitalism, or maybe the opportunities that they've gotten have changed their view, and now they no longer can relate to some of the struggles that individuals who are living in these impoverished communities are going through. So
yeah,
they kind of recognize that, like, it's a lot of this is about, like you said, this is more classism than this is about racism. Well, I mean,
yeah,
race plays obviously a very large part of this, but like classism is huge in this whole thing. And there are, you know, to make this a black and white thing would be incorrect, right?
right.
So yeah, that was a big like difference between like cultural nationalists versus like the Black Panther Party. And one of the big things that I don't think gets enough uh talking time when people are talking about the Black Panther Party was their social outreach, which I think was like something that makes this like kind of extraordinary.
Mhm.
So they take their efforts and they really start to expand to advocate for social reform. So they campaign for prison reform, voter registration. They like hold these voter registration drives. They organize free food programs, which included like food giveaways and school breakfast programs in several cities. They opened free healthcare clinics in dozens of cities, and they serve thousands who could not afford it. And they create the Freedom Schools in 9 cities, including a noteworthy one in Oakland Community School that was led by Erica Huggins from 1973 to 1981. So essentially, they really go into the communities and they start these programs that are just doing the things that their 10 points are saying they should be getting. So they start to like take action and actually like create really successful programs in their neighborhoods.
So you know what this is kind of reminding me of? This, if maybe to kind of make a little bit more sense. In Rhode Island, that we had some sort of a similar sort of thing with immigrants on Federal Hill. Like this group of people felt like they weren't being taken care of by their own government. They felt like they were being exploited by their own government, and so they had a group of people in that, you know, nationality, Italians, and this group of people protected the people as like an act of like enforcement against, either other nationalities or even the police
Is this the
or
mafia?
this is the mafia, right? In a sense, like it's sort of like well, I just remember like being a kid and hearing like, oh, Raymond Patriarca, who was like this big crime boss, like the Hill was so much better when Patriarca ran it, and he would get everyone was, had enough to eat. Everyone, if they needed something taken care of, it was taken care of. Granted, they killed a lot of people. It's a little bit different, but like. I mean, everyone in Turkey's. It just seems like something where it's like this group of people. It starts as something where we're here, no one's protecting us, we need a force that's going to protect us. Like it's
Yeah.
like a group of people saying we can have our own agency in this, we can kind of protect ourselves. it's
Yeah.
it's pride.
And so they end up calling these programs survival programs,
Mm.
which I think really emphasizes the attention or the urgency that they feel these communities need. Right, this is about survival. One of so as you mentioned earlier, actually, like they did a sickle cell testing center. They were doing things for schools, legal aid offices, clothing distribution, transportation things. One of the things they organized was this free breakfast program, and they fed 20,000 children each day.
That's a
Um, yeah. And I just think that like these are the things that you don't hear about when you hear about the Black Panther Party.
I mean, it's
These
incredible.
this community service that they're providing, the fact that they're highlighting all these things that they want to see changed, but they're also working on making the change themselves. I just think that's really impressive and something that I actually was really ignorant to as well before doing some of the research on
Well,
this.
that's what I think's missing with like some of the modern stuff.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? That's like
yeah.
kind of that's
We
like
gotta we gotta do more focus on that. I mean, and things are happening. There's plenty of if you research, you'll find plenty of community organizations that are doing great things for children, for different populations of people. But like you gotta get involved and you gotta seek it out in order to know it exists.
Yeah, so there's obviously a lot of controversy and resistance at this time. Like the FBI, Edgar, like I talked about before, he literally said that this is the most dangerous threat to our society right now, the Black Panther movement. And he also obviously said that about Martin Luther King, so we know that that's not really the truth. But in 1969, he pledged that that would be the last year of the Black Panther Party. That's a huge threat, saying like I'm the government,
Right.
and like you're part of my constituency, and I'm going to make sure that you're wiped out.
Yeah.
And the FBI's campaign, it culminates in December 1969 with 5-hour police shootout at the Southern California headquarters of the Black Panther Party. Um, this is where Fred Hampton was killed, which was a wildly charismatic leader. There's that movie. I hope I can think of the name of it. It's Judas and the Black Messiah. Did you see it?
I haven't.
Incredible, great movie, and it just kind of made me. I watched it with my son Jack. Actually, we watched it again today, and it was like it made me understand the movement so much more, and how there's like nuance in it, and how some people like there was this singer Shaka Khan who this isn't in the movie, but I read about this too, and she's a famous singer, but she was in the party, and she remembers that like once someone handed her a gun and they were about to go like do something. I don't know, maybe she felt like, oh, this isn't what this is supposed to be about, and she like threw the gun in the pond, and then she was kind of disenfranchised with it. But like it's this like political sort of controversial thing, but it's also run by people, so it has its flaws. It's just like super interesting, and obviously there was protest, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the leadership exiles to Cuba, where actually the one of the main founders, Newton, was killed in Cuba
Yeah.
with a drug dispute in 1989, right? Kind of really, it's really sad, you know?
And like, do you know anything about the drug dispute or anything like that? I
I
didn't
don't
get
know.
any.
I don't have any like information about and the drugs dispute wasn't in Cuba. Like after he came back from his exile to Cuba, he was actually killed right around where the whole thing started in Oakland,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is kind
And
of
and it's
poetic.
such like a like this sad note to put on like an effort made to try to improve and like actually try to put a stamp and on his, on a legacy almost like to uh try to build up this community project and try to, improve their position, try to expand on what the civil rights movement had done. And then for that to be how it ends for you after all that, it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And so essentially from the mid 70s through about the 80s, their activity pretty much all but ceases, right? And
Yeah.
like you said, he was, what was that, 1989, he had passed away. So by that point there were, I guess, the Black Panther Party was kind of already like done, I
Pretty
would
much.
say.
Pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. So the party just pretty much kind of dissolves, I guess.
Some
And
influence in the sense that like there was a woman who ran the Black Panthers for a little while for about 4 years, and she was able to get a couple well, at least one mayor elected, so like that kind of influence in cities, you know what I mean, where it's like
yeah,
we can rally and we can get someone like elected for city council or mayor, but like national presence and national influence by that time is just kind of
yeah.
not so much.
So, looking at what the influence of the Black Panther Party was, I mean, like as we mentioned before, it went far beyond just activism in the US. There was activists in Australian urban centers incorporated the works of Black Panther Party members into their social movements. The oppressed Dalits in India emulated the rhetoric of the Black Panthers. The representatives of the Vietnamese National Liberation Front, who called themselves Yellow Panthers, also used the organization as a model. And the Vanguard Party in the Bahamas closely studied the Black Panther Party, drew on its political philosophy, adopted its use of uniforms and its 10-point program, and published the newspaper Vanguard, whose scope and format mirrored the Black Panther Party's newspaper, Black Panther, to shape its program for activism.
Yeah.
So, just a few examples of how they reached far beyond just the US, but their influence.
Yeah, no, what I think is interesting too is like what this is militia, right? And in a sense, that's what we're supposed to. That's like I think it's a very American thing that like we were supposed to be able to gather up as groups to keep the government in check. Um, and I think that's like so ironically, that's what led Reagan to sign this like gun legislation against it. And that's what people are hoping people don't sign gun legislation for right now. So it's like I don't know. It's a very confusing thing. But I think we can agree that the one thing that the Black Panther Party highlights, even beyond race, is there is there's a serious class war going on then, and I think maybe even worse now. I mean, do you think that it's worse now? It feels like now we are just almost manipulated into hating each other, even though there's so we all of us different like melting pot, different races and ethnicities in this country. Like we share so much more in common than we do the differences. Like this, it's crazy that we feel like we should be at each other's throats, where it's like if we just kind of got on the same page and we're like, there needs to be, and I hate to say the idea of like distribution of wealth because I don't believe that. I don't believe that people should get things that they don't work for. But that said, like there shouldn't be people with an unspendable amount of money and people that don't have enough to feed their kids. I think that's
Right.
fucking like fundamentally inhuman and unfair and ridiculous and an exploitation of the resources that were here to sort of be enough for everybody. I mean, spiritually, from like a biblical sense almost, right? Like it's not here for everyone to take, like all the fruit in the world, or something like that. It's not what it was meant to be. It was meant to be like share. And like that's your strength. Oh well, you can't do that. Okay, well we can help you with that. It's like everyone just doing their best, I think. I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe that's like me getting older and being a little bit more like soft-hearted. I don't know.
There's a lot of things that are said in today's society that gives people the illusion that there is this the upper the the big ones up there are looking down for the little ones down here.
Yeah.
And when you take a step outside of that, and you look at it for what it is, like, how is that actually happening? Is it
It
really
doesn't seem
happening?
to be.
I don't see it. I don't see it on either side of any argument. It just feels like everybody is looking to see how they can benefit from what they like. They'll say, promise you the shirt off their back in order to get your support, but ultimately they're the only ones benefiting from that. And it's sad. It really is sad. And I think that, yeah, there's so much going on that just draws a bigger divide in society these days, and we got to figure out how to like look past that and just bring each other up. But
Yeah.
if we all bring each other up, then there's no power. And if there's no power, there's people
Society
aren't
loses.
happy, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know what the answer is, unfortunately. Yeah.
I don't
So
either. I don't either. I think it's kind of it has to be society is a funny thing. It has to almost to exist. It has to have this like structure of the haves and the have-nots and the have a little bits and the have a little bit more. Like it has to be like set up that way, or else it doesn't
yeah.
work.
The interesting thing is, though, like, we all understand obviously that like there's different types of personalities, right?
Yeah.
There's self-initiators, there's leaders, there's followers, there's people who take great orders and can execute anything, but like can't come up with the ideas on their own. There's like, so we understand, like, obviously within a society of that many different types of thinking and thought process, obviously you're going to have different roles for everybody.
Hmm.
The issue becomes when some roles benefit way more than other roles, and then you have like this giant like class you know
Divide,
separation,
right? Yeah, yeah.
divide. And that seems to be where we've been for quite a while, I guess. um One of my big questions after kind of reflecting on all this
Okay.
is that big question that I think they bring up: is violence needed to incite change in certain situations? And I think that that's a really relevant question, because we just recently had that shooting of the healthcare corporation owner, and like,
Yep.
I know that
Giannione's, it's like a huge thing right now. Yeah.
it became a very huge topic of debate. Like, can there be some silver lining when murder is involved? And like, I don't know if there's a good answer, or if there's an answer that should even be said about that, because obviously taking someone's life is a serious thing.
Mhm.
Um,
To
but
me, I'll say this. I'll say when I told my kid today that like people were poor, asking for money outside of the Colosseum in Rome, and 2,000 years ago, people like war has been going on as long as there were humans, right? So like there's something about violence that affects change. It just does. And is it necessary? I don't know. Would the Holocaust have ended without violence?
and I guess I look at like, Martin Luther King philosophy versus, Black Panther philosophy. They obviously felt like these, trying to have peaceful protests or nonviolent protests or sit-ins, they felt like it wasn't effective enough, or maybe it wasn't fast acting enough. I don't know.
Well, the genius of Martin Luther King is like if you look at like Emmett Till or whatever, like if you look at what that footage of people being sprayed and people just sitting and like doing these sit-ins and being pulled out, and you see black people being passive and peaceful and white people attacking them, and that gets the kind of like the rest of the country who's just kind of like not really sure about what's going on to say like that looks wrong,
Right. It
right?
highlights
And
something.
yeah, that looks wrong, and I feel very uncomfortable with that. And I think that like I'm you've got me on your
Sure.
side in a sense. Where on the other side of it with the Black Panther movement, it's like you see people with like guns standing out in the streets, and you're like,
They demand they
yeah,
demand
yeah,
something, right? They have a presence
yeah.
that they're
It's
and
a
they're
different
showing you like
feeling.
you're
Yeah.
not going to walk all over us anymore. I
Martin Luther King
and
was a genius. I'm a huge fan of his writing and shit. Like I really am. Like he was a genius. It
Yeah,
sucks that he died. Like who knows, how things could have changed. But
yeah,
they were after him too.
of course.
Because it was working. The FBI was after him because what he was doing was working.
Yeah. So I
And
don't
just
think
like,
we necessarily have an answer of
no,
whether
of course not.
violent.
We now do we ever?
No, I think that it's a question that people maybe need to consider on their own and also see benefits in both sides to it.
Mhm.
Yes, violence can definitely incite change, but also can showing resilience, showing that you can make yourself look, you can show your true colors, you can show your hate. I'm going
Mhm.
to sit here and I'm going to show you that I'm not going away.
More powerful, I think, actually.
Mm.
Maybe.
Um, I also wanted to ask you, what were some of your early biases about the Black Panther Party
Like
before
I
you
said, I
did
mean, honestly,
research?
I thought it was a very militant, like if I had been walking by the Black Panther Party, or if I walked in by accident, they would be like, get the hell out of here. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah, it
Like that's
felt
how I felt.
exclusive, right? It
Yeah,
felt very
yeah.
exclusive. And another influence that I had early on, which is like silly to even say out loud. Do you remember the movie Dead Presidents?
Damn it, I don't think I ever saw that.
Okay, so that was a movie I used to love, and yeah, they showed him as they were represented as very militant, and it's also kind of engaging in some like there's some armed robbery that happens in the time when he
Yeah.
becomes like when he gets involvement with Black Panther Party, like so it kind of showed that like there was issues within the party, so it kind of in a way like almost portrayed it in like sort of this negative light
Could
again.
have
So
Forrest Gump, kind of,
oh right, right,
you know?
yep.
A
So
little bit.
and I wonder
Although I
that
think
like
Jenny was a member of the Black Panther
well,
Party
she
for a little
might have
bit.
been actually, was
Yeah,
she?
for a little bit.
Yeah. So that actually maybe showed a little bit more of
That might have been, yeah, making a little bit more sense.
inclusion.
Watch Judas and the Black Messiah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been on my
I
list
like
for a while.
recommend that to everyone. It's kind of great. The guy who plays Chapman, actually,
No,
all
it's
the
from
actors,
Get Out. It's the actor from Get Out.
guy
I
is
can't remember his name.
unbelievable. The other guy, who's like infiltrates, who's an informant for the FBI, unbelievable. They're both so great, and it's just a kind of a great movie.
I was curious if the lack of mention of the Black Panther Party being aligned with non-black with yeah, like white allies and things like that, or even like the social outreach programs, does that exclusion of information when people are talking about it or delivering information, does it feel intentional?
Of
So I feel
course,
like people don't want us to know
yeah,
about
of
these
course,
positive sides of
of
this
course, yeah.
very like strong minded group.
I'll tell you, there weren't any black members of, despite what like the Chappelle Show might tell you, there weren't any black members of the KKK. There just weren't.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is something that's a little bit different, a little bit more inclusive.
Right.
Um,
I,
which
I I would advocate that I think there should be more taught about the Black Panther Party
I think so too.
to the youth or to college level students. I think they should have more focus in education.
It's an important political party, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
I think so.
now you mentioned it, though, I don't know how many political parties I can name besides Democrat, Republican. I
Cool
mean,
Moose Party,
the Cool Moose. That's a very Rhode Island thing. The Whig Party. I don't know. Federalists.
the Boston Tea Party.
Yep, that's true. Yep. There you go.
So
Now you can tell it's getting late.
yeah. All right. Well, Greg, any final words?
No, I think that that's it's t we do these things and Black History Month, and we try to do our best with them. And every like sort of month or group or whatever it is, we try to do our best and just be honest with it. And I think that like hopefully people appreciate that because it's us just trying to be like real and honest about these things and how we felt about it and what we think about it. And you know, this is always just us trying to get you guys to, oh, am I interested in that? Yeah. All right. Let me give it a little bit of a
Yeah.
deeper dive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't definitely don't
We're not
feel
experts
like
in it.
we're experts. Yeah.
No.
Um, Kind of shifting into just a little ratings and reviews, which we ask for
Okay.
every week. So
Yep.
we got one from Chloe Rose on Apple. It says, "Thank you, 5 stars. Truly my favorite podcast. Very informative and entertaining." Chloe, no, thank you.
We love you because for you to say truly my favorite podcast is like that took me. That hit me a
Yeah,
little bit in my heart. And thank you.
thank you for that. And yeah, for everybody who supports and listens and has shared a review or rated the podcast, we appreciate you. It's definitely helped, and I just feel like that's the reason why we do this is because of that feedback and knowing that it's connecting and that people are finding some use out of it. And even for people who have shared some constructive criticism, we appreciate that as well. We'll do our best to kind of continue to make this the best thing we can do.
We will
Thank
try
you.
our best.
Yeah.
And as our hopeful upcoming months this year get less stressful, we will I don't know, try to like I was thinking about today like wanting to try to get more like active again on social media and things like that. We will get there.
We used to have a good time with it.
We used to have a good time with it, and we will get back there. But I'll tell you one thing we won't do is ever like, especially for the people that have been with us the entire time. There's like a good group of you guys. We'll be here every week. That we will be. Dave, do you agree?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll be here every week.
Every week.
Do every week, doing our best.
Doing
And
that for quite a while. We've only
thanks for
missed a few.
sticking. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've only missed a few, and God, I think 3 years
Yeah.
more.
That's crazy if you think
You,
about it.
or more. I mean, over 3 years, I think. So
It's wild. I
that
think
is
April's like our anniversary for the show or something like that. And yeah,
is it our 4 year anniversary or
I would
3 year
have to
anniversary?
look.
That's
It
what
might
it
be
is.
3, but
Yeah,
it's
even
been a
still,
while.
that's a while. It's like having a
Yeah,
job for 3 years. Like you're pretty established.
I know. I know. But we appreciate everybody who new and old for listening, and we will see you next week. I also want to apologize. I had promised that we were doing 2 recommendation user listener recommendations, and then I realized that we hadn't done this, so we had to squeeze this in. Next week is a listener recommendation, followed by our St. Patrick's Day episode, followed by another listener recommendation. So that's
Damn,
going to be
man.
the upcoming order for the next 3 weeks. Um, we're looking forward to it. Hope you are too. We will see you then. Have a great night, everybody. See you later.
See you
Peace.
later.